So let's be honest. The marriage process is not easy. It's not always going to be easy. And I'm sure you've had your share of hearing stories of heartbreak or really horrible circumstances that people have gone through. Ultimately, like everything else in life, trying to get married is a test, and your marriage itself will be a test. And so in this video, we are going to discuss just a few basic hiccups that you might come across in your marriage searching experience. Now, like everything, this is just a 5-minute video. We're not going to have time to go through details about each scenario, but I'm just going to offer a few different advices that you should consider when it comes to these different scenarios. So the first scenario is something that we hate to have happen, but it is a very realistic expectation to have, and it's the expectation of being rejected. Let's say that you ask for someone or you're interested in someone. There's no guarantee that that person is going to be interested back. There's no guarantee that that person is going to see themselves as a proper match to you. It can be really devastating, especially if you were already emotionally invested in the person. And even if you weren't emotionally invested, getting rejected is very hard. It hurts the ego. So a few different pieces of advice to have when it comes to the idea of being rejected. The first and foremost is, before even making it known that you are interested in this person, approaching their parents, approaching them, whatever it might be comfortable with the idea of rejection. Let yourself know and have a conversation with yourself that, hey, there's no guarantee that this person is going to be interested in me, and that is okay. It's not necessarily going to remove the hurt that comes with rejection, but at the very least, it'll help dull it a bit because you had that expectation in your mind. Another thing to consider when it comes to being rejected is it's helpful to keep your conversation, or the idea, the conversation that you will have with this person or their parents, on the down low. In other words, be mindful of not letting a bunch of people know, because after getting rejected, it can be really hard to have to explain to people why something didn't happen. And had you not told them about it, then you wouldn't have had to explain several times. This is something I recommend really in any circumstance when it comes to marriage, until things are absolutely official, to keep it to yourself and just continue to make dua about it until it is official and you can announce it. Now, on the other hand of being rejected is the person who's doing the rejecting. It can be almost a guilt-driven decision that we feel we're making when we're deciding whether to say yes or no to someone. And it's important to realize that ultimately when it comes to marriage, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has already written the person that you are going to marry. Every rejection or every person that asks is just a person closer to that person for you. And ultimately, if that person isn't in this dunya, they are waiting for you in the akhirah. So if it comes to it that you have prayed your istikhara, you have sought counsel, you've discussed it with maybe friends or advisors or mentors, and you find that this is not a person that you're really interested in, and they have asked for you or they're interested in you, it's okay to do the rejection. Ultimately, they do not have the right to your yes. You have the right to say no. And sometimes, to help with the guilt of saying no, it's helpful if you're able to give the rejection in what we call a compliment sandwich. So for example, a compliment sandwich is when you say a compliment, you give the criticism, and then you give another compliment. It helps people to accept the rejection a little better. And so, for example, you might say something like, you seem like a really responsible Muslim, or you seem like you are someone who has a very bright future ahead of you. Compliment. Criticism: I just do not think we're a good match, or unfortunately you don't have the qualities I'm looking for, or whatever it might be. That was the actual reason you decided to reject them. It might be helpful for them to know. And then last, but I wish you well in the future. I pray Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grants you a righteous spouse, whatever it might be. And in that way, you're at the very least able to close the door on this conversation and do it in a way that isn't rude, angry, or hostile. Now, the reason when it comes to that criticism, I really recommend you being honest. And if you are closing that door, to be very clear that you're closing the door. Because unfortunately, some people are not very good at respecting boundaries, and they might try to ask multiple times or to try to agitate you and see if they can convince you otherwise. In that case, I would just recommend being very clear. You do not have XYZ, and I will not consider it. And if there is a door open, or perhaps there's something you wish for them to work on, let them know that. but be very clear. And oftentimes women especially will have this fear of rejecting someone in pointing out the qualities that we don't like because we don't want them to feel bad. But in the situation, be as clear as you possibly can, because it's going to help protect you as well. So those are two circumstances that I think are often that we don't really talk about until they actually happen. And I hope that the advice given is something that's helpful to you. And if you do experience either of these scenarios, I wish that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grants you peace in your decision and in your experience, and ultimately allows it to be a pathway to something even better for you. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.